I'm Candace, 38 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was the senior systems architect at Meridian Technologies for 16 years. I built the proprietary software that powers banking systems worth billions. Then one day, the new CEO ordered me to train his unqualified son as my replacement. When I refused, I was fired on the spot. Today, I'm back at Meridian as a consultant, making 11 times my former salary. Before I tell you how I went from being escorted out by security to becoming the highest paid consultant in company history, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories about standing your ground when it matters most. I never planned to become the backbone of a major financial technology company. My journey at Meridian Technologies began right after I completed my master's degree in computer science from Stanford. I was 22, ambitious, and frankly a bit naive about corporate politics. Back then, Meridian was an up-and-coming financial software provider with about 50 employees and big dreams of disrupting the banking software industry. I started as a junior developer, just one of 6 people working on what would eventually become BankCore, our flagship product. In those early days, I worked directly with Robert Thompson, the founder and original CEO, a brilliant engineer who valued talent and hard work above all else. Under his mentorship, I learned not just coding, but the intricate dance between technology and finance that makes systems like ours so valuable and so complicated. By year 3, I was leading my own team. By year 5, I had been promoted twice and was responsible for the most critical components of our system. BankCore had evolved into a complex suite of interconnected modules that processed transactions for 3 of the 10 largest banks in the country. My specialty became the transaction reconciliation engine, the heart of the system that ensures money moves accurately down to the penny across thousands of accounts simultaneously. Candace is the only person who fully understands how all the pieces fit together, Robert would say during board meetings. It wasn't entirely true, of course, but I did have a unique ability to see both the forest and the trees when it came to our technology stack. When critical issues arose, which they inevitably did in financial software, I was the one called at 3 a.m. to diagnose and fix them. There was the time Bank of Atlantic had a reconciliation failure that threatened to delay payroll processing for over 200,000 employees. I worked 36 straight hours, fueled by coffee and determination, and identified a rare race condition that only occurred under specific load patterns. The fix saved Bank of Atlantic millions in potential penalties and solidified our reputation for reliability. My team grew as the company did. By my 10th year, I was managing 15 developers, each brilliant in their own right. Jacob Winters was my right hand, a database wizard who could optimize queries that others had given up on. Rachel Lawson handled our security protocols with a paranoia that was perfectly suited to protecting financial data. Diana Chen specialized in the user interface, making complex functions intuitive for bank employees. Then there was Miranda Gallagher, 10 years my senior, and the person who had interviewed me on day 1. Though technically we were peers on the org chart, she remained a mentor and friend. Miranda had seen it all in her 30 years in technology and provided wisdom that went beyond code. Companies change, Candace, she told me during a lunch celebrating my 15th anniversary with Meridian. The trick is to make yourself valuable to the mission, not just to the current leadership. I should have paid more attention to that advice. By that point, Meridian had grown to over 400 employees. Our software was running in 7 of the 10 largest banks in the country, plus dozens of regional institutions. We'd gone public 3 years earlier, and while that had made many early employees wealthy on paper, it also changed the company's dynamics. Shareholders wanted growth, the board focused on quarterly numbers, and the pressure to continuously expand our client base intensified. Still, I loved my job. I had built a reputation throughout the industry as one of the top experts in financial transaction systems. I had spoken at conferences, published papers, and even been featured in Financial Technology Monthly as one of the 40 under 40 innovators. My salary had grown substantially over the years, allowing me to buy a beautiful 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, take international vacations, and even help my parents retire early. I felt secure. My team respected me. My work challenged me. The compensation rewarded me. I had turned down headhunters offering positions at Google, Amazon, and several promising startups. Meridian was my home and I couldn't imagine working anywhere else. That sense of security was the first thing to change when Robert Thompson announced his retirement. The company-wide email arrived on a Monday morning, leadership transition announcement. Robert was retiring, after 20 years, at the helm of Meridian Technologies. The board had selected Richard Bennett as the new CEO, an executive from Apex Financial with a proven track record of maximizing shareholder value and aggressive growth strategies. I remember sharing concerned glances with Miranda across the conference room during the all-hands meeting where Richard was introduced. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, with perfectly coiffed silver hair and the practiced smile of someone who had spent decades in boardrooms. Meridian has built incredible technology, he told us during his introduction speech. Now it's time to leverage that technology to create the returns our shareholders deserve. Some changes will be necessary to position us for the future. Those changes began almost immediately. Within his first month, Richard brought in consultants from McKinsey to evaluate organizational efficiency. 2 weeks later, the first round of layoffs hit primarily in customer support and quality assurance departments. Richard deemed cost centers rather than growth drivers. My first direct interaction with Richard came during an executive review of our product roadmap. I had prepared a detailed presentation on our planned enhancements to the transaction engine improvements that would increase throughput by 30% while reducing hardware requirements. This all sounds very technical, Richard interrupted halfway through my slides. What I'm not hearing is how these changes drive revenue. Are clients paying extra for this? I explained that these improvements were part of our ongoing commitment to our clients, maintaining our competitive edge in a rapidly evolving market. So that's a no, he said dismissively. We need to focus on features we can monetize, not back-end optimizations that clients take for granted. It was clear that Richard and I had fundamentally different views on what made Meridian successful. To me, our technical excellence and reliability were our greatest assets. To him, they were simply costs to be minimized. The first real red flag appeared 3 months into Richard's tenure. A company-wide email announced the hiring of Nathan Bennett as Junior Technology Strategist, reporting directly to the CTO. The email mentioned Nathan's recent graduation from Westridge University, with a business degree and an interest in technology innovation. What the email didn't mention was that Nathan was Richard's son. The rumors spread quickly. Nathan had apparently struggled to find employment after college, despite his father's connections. His resume had been rejected by several tech companies, including competitors of ours, before landing at his father's new company. "Have you met the prince yet?" Jacob asked me one morning using the nickname that had already spread throughout the tech department. I hadn't, but that changed later that week, when our CTO Marcus Wilson brought Nathan to our department meeting. Nathan was 23 with his father's tall frame, but none of his polish. While Richard projected calculated authority, Nathan emanated entitled boredom. He spent most of the meeting looking at his phone, only glancing up when his name was mentioned. Nathan will be spending time with various teams to gain a comprehensive understanding of our technology, Marcus explained, not quite meeting anyone's eyes. We all understood what was happening. The CEO's son was being given a tour of the kingdom he hadn't earned access to. Initially, Nathan was just an annoyance, shadowing different team leaders and asking basic questions that revealed his lack of technical knowledge. Most of us tried to be professional, answering his questions patiently and giving him simple tasks that wouldn't impact critical systems. Then came the restructuring of the bonus system. Richard announced that individual performance bonuses would now be tied partly to mentorship effectiveness measured by the progress of junior team members. The implications weren't subtle. "They're setting us up," Miranda told me during our weekly lunch. "Richard's making sure his son succeeds, even if he has to force everyone else to do Nathan's job for him." My concerns grew when Nathan started showing up to my team meetings uninvited. He would interrupt discussions with irrelevant questions or suggestions that showed a fundamental misunderstanding of our work. When gently corrected, he would often respond defensively, reminding us that he had the ear of the executive team. The atmosphere in my previously cohesive team began to deteriorate. Team members became hesitant to speak openly in meetings where Nathan was present. Several expressed frustration in private about having to simplify their work for someone who hadn't earned his position. "I've got 15 years of experience and 2 advanced degrees," Rachel told me after a particularly difficult meeting. "Now I'm spending hours explaining basic security concepts to someone who can't be bothered to do the reading I assigned." I tried to shield my team as much as possible while still following the directive to involve Nathan. I assigned Jacob to give Nathan some basic database projects, hoping that clear contained assignments might be more successful than general shadowing. 2 days later, Jacob came to my office looking stressed. He dropped a production table while practicing queries, he said. Luckily, it was on the development server, not production, but he didn't even understand why it was a problem. When I tried to explain, he said I was being condescending and threatened to talk to his father. That evening, I received an email from Richard requesting a meeting the next morning to discuss team dynamics and mentoring approaches. The subject line included RE Development Server Incident. I forwarded the email to Miranda with just a question mark. Her response was immediate. "Be careful, Candace. This isn't about code anymore." The meeting with Richard was scheduled for 8:30 in the morning in his corner office. I arrived 10 minutes early, armed with documentation of the development server incident and a constructive plan for better integrating Nathan into the team with appropriate guardrails. Richard's assistant, a perpetually nervous woman named Susan, ushered me in promptly at 8:30. Richard sat behind an imposing desk of dark wood, with Nathan lounging in one of the guest chairs. Marcus, our CTO, sat in the other, looking uncomfortable. "Candace, thank you for joining us." Richard began, his tone cordial but cold. "I understand there have been some challenges integrating Nathan into the development team." Before I could respond, he continued. "Nathan has expressed interest in specializing in the transaction reconciliation engine. Given your expertise in this area, I believe this presents an excellent mentoring opportunity." I took a breath before responding, choosing my words carefully. "I appreciate Nathan's interest in the reconciliation engine. It's certainly a crucial part of our system. However, it's also incredibly complex and requires extensive background knowledge in both distributed systems and financial protocols." Richard smiled thinly, "Which is precisely why having an expert mentor like yourself is so valuable. I'd like you to develop a comprehensive training plan for Nathan, with the goal of having him able to independently maintain and enhance the reconciliation engine within 6 months." The request struck me as absurd. The reconciliation engine had taken me years to fully master, building on an already strong foundation in computer science. Nathan had a business degree and 3 months of casual exposure to our code base. "With all due respect," I said, "I think 6 months is an unrealistic time frame. The reconciliation engine is not an entry-level system. Even experienced developers typically need a year or more to become proficient with it." "Nathan is a quick learner," Richard insisted, "and he'll have the benefit of one-on-one training from you." I glanced at Nathan, who was smirking slightly, then at Marcus, who was studying the carpet with great interest. "May I ask why Nathan is being focused specifically on the reconciliation engine? There are other components that might be more accessible for someone at his experience level." Richard's expression hardened slightly. "As I mentioned, Nathan has expressed particular interest in this area. Additionally, as we look to the future of Meridian, we need to ensure that critical systems don't have single points of failure." He looked at me pointedly. "No offense, Candace, but the company has become overly dependent on you for this core functionality." And there it was. I wasn't being asked to mentor Nathan. I was being asked to make myself replaceable by someone with no qualifications, someone who happened to be the CEO's son. "I understand the concern about knowledge concentration," I replied carefully. "I've actually been working with Jacob and Teresa to cross-train them on the reconciliation engine. Both have the necessary background and have contributed to recent updates. That's good to hear, Richard said dismissively, but Nathan will be taking point on this. I expect you to give this your full attention. In fact, I'd like you to reduce your other responsibilities by 50% to focus on Nathan's training. Marcus will help redistribute your team's workload. Marcus nodded silently, still not meeting my eyes. I felt trapped. Refusing outright would be career suicide, but what Richard was asking was professionally irresponsible. The reconciliation engine processed billions of dollars in transactions daily. Putting it in the hands of an unqualified novice wasn't just bad business, it was potentially dangerous. I'm concerned about the impact on our delivery schedule, I tried. We have major enhancements promised to Bank of Atlantic and First National this quarter. Those can be delayed if necessary, Richard said. Developing our talent is the priority here. After the meeting, I retreated to my office, closed the door, and called Miranda. They want me to make Nathan my replacement, I told her after explaining the meeting. For the reconciliation engine. In 6 months. That's impossible, she said immediately. He doesn't have the background. Tell that to Richard. He's cutting my other responsibilities in half to make this happen. Miranda was quiet for a moment. You have 2 options as I see it. Play along and let the inevitable failure happen, or push back and risk your position. If I play along and he breaks something crucial because I've been forced to give him access he shouldn't have, that's on me professionally, I said. But if I refuse, then Richard will likely find a reason to push you out. Miranda finished. The question is whether you can live with either outcome. I spent the weekend agonizing over my options. By Monday, I had decided to try a middle path. I would create a rigorous training plan for Nathan that started with the absolute basics. If he was genuinely interested and capable, he would engage with the material. If not, his lack of progress would be documented and quantifiable. I presented Nathan with a structured learning path, beginning with fundamental concepts and assigned reading material on distributed systems. I scheduled daily 1-hour sessions to review concepts and answer questions. Nathan missed our first session. When I emailed him, he replied that he had a lunch meeting with Dad and some investors. The next day, he showed up 20 minutes late and admitted he hadn't done the reading. This theoretical stuff is boring, he complained. I want to see the actual code and start making changes. That's how I learn best. The theory is essential to understanding why the code works the way it does, I explained. Making changes without understanding the underlying principles is dangerous in a financial system. Nathan rolled his eyes. I think you're just overcomplicating things to make yourself seem more important. Despite his resistance, I persisted with the training plan, documenting every session, every assignment given, and Nathan's level of engagement with each. After 2 weeks, Nathan had completed less than 20% of the assigned readings and could not correctly answer basic questions about the system's architecture. During our 3rd week, Nathan asked for access to the production codebase. I explained that according to company policy, he would need to complete security training and demonstrate proficiency in the development environment first. My father already approved it, he claimed, showing me an email from Richard directing the security team to expedite access credentials for Nathan Bennett to all systems required for his training. I immediately called Marcus, who confirmed that Richard had overridden the standard security protocols. My hands are tied on this Candace, he said apologetically. Just keep a close eye on him, okay? The situation reached a breaking point that Friday. I had been in meetings all afternoon when Jacob called me in a panic. Nathan pushed code directly to the staging environment, bypassing code review, he said. It broke the daily reconciliation test. We've got banks reporting mismatched transactions in the test system. I rushed back to find my team working frantically to roll back Nathan's changes. The code he had pushed showed a fundamental misunderstanding of how transactions were validated, introducing a flaw that could potentially allow duplicate transactions in certain edge cases. When I confronted Nathan, he became defensive. I was just trying to optimize the validation routine like we discussed. It's not my fault your test system is so fragile. We didn't discuss this at all, I said, struggling to keep my voice even. And you bypassed mandatory code review. This could have caused serious problems if it had gone to production. Whatever, Nathan replied, gathering his things. My father says the code review process is inefficient anyway. You're all too afraid to innovate because you're protecting your little fiefdoms. As he left, I saw him pull out his phone and begin texting. I had a sinking feeling about who was on the receiving end of those messages. Sure enough, within an hour, I received an email from Richard's assistant scheduling a meeting for Monday morning with Richard, Nathan, Marcus, and Patricia from HR. The subject line read, Performance Concerns. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. I had spent the weekend preparing a detailed report of Nathan's training progress, the staging environment incident, and my concerns about accelerating his access to critical systems. I also backed up my personal emails and gathered documentation of my contributions to Meridian over 16 years just in case. Patricia from HR was already in Richard's office when I arrived along with Nathan and Marcus. Richard sat behind his desk, a single folder in front of him. Candace, please sit down, he began without preamble. We need to discuss some serious concerns about your mentorship of Nathan. Before I could respond, he continued, Nathan has reported that you've been deliberately withholding information, creating unnecessary obstacles to his learning, and generally displaying a hostile attitude toward his advancement. I took a deep breath. I've documented our training sessions thoroughly, I said, placing my report on his desk. Nathan has missed or been late to 60% of our scheduled meetings, completed less than 20% of assigned reading, and pushed untested code to staging that caused a system failure. Richard didn't even glance at the report. Nathan tells me you've been assigning busy work and theoretical exercises, rather than providing practical hands-on experience with the systems. Understanding the theory is essential before modifying financial code, I explained. That's standard practice for any new developer regardless of their role or relationships. Nathan interrupted. You've been treating me like a student instead of a colleague. Dad, she refuses to give me real responsibilities. She keeps saying I'm not ready or need more background. It's been almost a month. I turned to face Nathan directly. You are a student in this context. You have no experience in financial systems, distributed computing, or transaction processing. The reconciliation engine handles billions of dollars daily. It's not a learning toy. Richard's face hardened. That's exactly the elitist attitude Nathan has described. You seem to think your systems are too complex for anyone else to understand. Not anyone else, I clarified. Just someone without the necessary background. Jacob and Teresa have both been developing expertise in the reconciliation engine. The difference is they have computer science degrees and years of relevant experience. So you're saying my son isn't qualified? Richard's voice was dangerously quiet. I looked directly at him, aware I was crossing a point of no return. For this specific role with his current background, no, he's not. And pushing him into it prematurely puts our client's financial data at risk. The room fell silent. Marcus stared at his hands. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. Nathan's face reddened. Richard stood slowly. Candace, it's clear to me that you're unable or unwilling to adapt to Meridian's new direction. Your resistance to knowledge sharing and mentorship represents a liability to our growth objectives. Knowledge sharing isn't the issue, I responded, my voice steady, despite my racing heart. I've trained dozens of developers. I've created more documentation than anyone else on the technical team. What I won't do is pretend that someone with 3 weeks of intermittent attention is qualified to manage critical financial infrastructure. Richard's smile was cold. Patricia, please explain the separation package to Candace. Her employment is terminated effective immediately. The next hour passed in a blur. Patricia detailed a severance package that included 3 months of salary contingent upon signing a non-disparagement agreement. I was required to surrender my laptop badge and company phone. I was not allowed to return to my desk unsupervised. Security was called to escort me from the building. As we walked through the open office area, I saw the shocked faces of my team members. Jacob half rose from his chair, but I subtly shook my head. No need for anyone else to risk their position. Miranda met me at the elevator, her face grim. This is wrong, she said quietly. Everyone knows it. Tell the team I'm sorry, I replied. And watch the reconciliation engine. Nathan doesn't understand transaction idempotency. If he makes changes, there could be serious problems. The security guard politely but firmly indicated that I should not be discussing company matters. Miranda squeezed my arm and whispered, I'll call you tonight. Walking to my car in the parking garage, carrying a small box with the personal items from my desk, the reality began to sink in. 16 years. Gone in an instant, because I refused to pretend that nepotism trumped technical qualification. At home, I alternated between rage, shock, and fear. My entire professional identity had been built around my role at Meridian. Who was I without it? Would other companies believe my side of the story? Or would Richard's influence in the industry poison potential opportunities? I didn't sleep that night, or much over the days that followed. I declined to sign the non-disparagement agreement, forfeiting the severance package, but keeping my right to tell the truth about what had happened. Miranda called as promised and continued to check in regularly. Through her and other sympathetic colleagues, I learned that Richard had announced my departure as a mutual decision to pursue other opportunities. Nathan had been formally appointed as acting lead of the transaction systems team, reporting directly to Marcus, who looked like he's aged 10 years in a week, according to Jacob. 3 weeks after my firing, I received the first text from a former colleague about problems in the production system. Transaction reconciliations were taking twice as long as normal, causing delays in end-of-day processing. The next week, Bank of Atlantic reported discrepancies in their balance sheets that took 4 days to resolve. I took no pleasure in these developments. These were systems I had built and nurtured for years. Knowing they were struggling felt like hearing that a child was ill. But I also had my own problems to solve. My savings would last several months, but I needed a new direction. As the initial shock faded, I began to consider options I'd never seriously explored before. 1 month after my firing, I was sitting in my home office updating my resume when Miranda called. How would you feel about starting your own consulting business? She asked without preamble. The thought had crossed my mind but seemed daunting. I don't know the first thing about running a business, I admitted. You know how to solve the hardest problems in financial transaction systems, Miranda pointed out. The business part you can learn or hire someone to handle. But there's no one who knows Bancor like you do. She was right, I realized. For 16 years, I had focused on being an excellent employee, taking pride in my technical contributions, but leaving the business aspects to others. Perhaps it was time to expand my horizons. The next day, I filed paperwork to create Candace Ross Consulting LLC. I built a simple website highlighting my expertise in financial transaction systems, distributed computing, and technical leadership. Miranda discreetly spread the word among her industry contacts that I was available for consulting engagements. My first client was small, a credit union, needing help optimizing their transaction processing. The project was straightforward, but it gave me confidence that I could deliver value independently. The second client came through a former colleague who had moved to another company, and the third through a recommendation from the first. 6 weeks into my new venture, I was earning enough to cover my expenses, though not nearly what I had made at Meridian. More importantly, I was rediscovering my passion for solving technical challenges without corporate politics clouding the work. Then came the call I hadn't expected. Alicia Reeves, a member of Meridian's board of directors, asked if we could meet privately. We had interacted occasionally during my time at Meridian, mostly during technical reviews for the board. She had always struck me as sharp and independent-minded. We met at a quiet restaurant far from Meridian's offices. After brief pleasantries, Alicia got straight to the point. Meridian is in trouble, she said. The transaction reconciliation system is failing regularly. 3 major clients are threatening to switch providers if the issues aren't resolved immediately. I wasn't entirely surprised, but the timeline was faster than I'd anticipated. What happened? I asked. Alicia sighed. After you left, Nathan convinced his father to approve a modernization initiative for the reconciliation engine. He made significant changes without adequate testing. The system is now experiencing cascading failures during high-volume periods. Where's Marcus in all this? He should have prevented such significant changes without proper review. Marcus resigned 3 weeks ago. Richard replaced him with a friend from his previous company who has no background in financial systems. The situation was worse than I'd imagined. What about my former team? Jacob and Teresa understand the reconciliation engine better than anyone except me. Both resigned shortly after Marcus. Several others have left as well. The brain drain is severe. I sat back processing this information. Why are you telling me this, Alicia? She leaned forward. Because the board is finally waking up to the reality of Richard's leadership. Quarterly results are catastrophic. The stock has dropped 30%. There's talk of class action lawsuits from shareholders. And Nathan. They're still insisting he can fix the problems he created. Richard defends him in board meetings, but his influence is waning as the financial impact grows. I'm sorry to hear that Meridian is struggling, I said carefully. But I'm not sure what this has to do with me. Alicia met my eyes directly. Several board members want to bring you back as a consultant to fix the reconciliation engine. Richard is opposed, of course, but he may soon find himself outvoted. I felt a complex mix of emotions. Vindication, certainly. Concern for the systems I had built. But also wariness about re-entering a toxic situation. I'm building my own business now, I said. If the board wants to engage my services, they can contact me officially through my company. My rates are significantly higher than my former salary, and I would require complete technical authority over any systems I'm asked to repair. Alicia smiled slightly. I expected nothing less. I'll take your terms to the board. Don't be surprised if you hear from us soon. A week later, I received a formal email from Meridian's board requesting an urgent meeting to discuss a consulting arrangement. The email was copied to Richard Bennett, whose name appeared in the recipient list, but who had apparently not written the message. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I researched industry-standard consulting rates for specialists with my expertise and multiplied by 3 given the urgent and complex nature of the situation. I drafted a contract that specified complete technical authority, no direct reporting to Richard or Nathan, and payment terms that required 50% up front. When I arrived at Meridian's offices for the meeting, I wore my most professional attire and projected confidence I wasn't entirely sure I felt. I was shown to the main boardroom where 8 of the 10 board members sat along with Richard, who looked distinctly unhappy, and Patricia from HR. Alicia opened the meeting. Thank you for coming, Candace. As you may be aware, Meridian is experiencing significant technical challenges with our core transaction systems. The board has determined that your expertise is urgently needed to address these issues. Richard interrupted. While we appreciate your availability, I want to be clear that this would be a short-term engagement, focused specifically on documenting the reconciliation engine architecture for our current team. Several board members exchanged glances. The chairman, Walter Davis, cleared his throat. Actually, Richard, the board has voted to bring Candace in with broader authority. Given the critical nature of the situation, we need her to directly implement solutions, not just document them. Richard's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Walter turned to me. Candace will be direct. Multiple banking clients are threatening to terminate their contracts due to system instability. Our stock has fallen significantly. We need the transaction reconciliation system fixed as quickly as possible. What would it take to secure your services? I placed my contract proposal on the table. My consulting rate is $11,000 per day with a minimum engagement of 30 days. I require 50% payment upfront and the remainder due regardless of early termination. I must have complete technical authority over the reconciliation engine and related systems reporting directly to the board, not to management. Any changes to these systems proposed by others must receive my written approval during the engagement period. The room fell silent. My former salary had worked out to about $1,000 per day. I was asking for 11 times that amount. Richard finally spoke, his voice tight. That's absurd. No consultant is worth that much. Alicia responded before I could. The ongoing issues are costing us approximately $300,000 per day in emergency support penalty fees and lost business. If Candace can resolve them within 30 days, even at her rate, we'd be saving millions. The chairman studied my contract, then looked up at me. Your terms are steep, but given the circumstances, acceptable. However, I need to know that you can actually solve these problems. The system has been substantially modified since your departure. I met his gaze confidently. I built the original system and maintained it for over a decade. I trained the developers who understood it best. While I haven't seen the recent changes, the fundamental architecture is my design. If anyone can fix it, I can. He nodded slowly. And your timeline? I'll need a day to assess the current state. After that, I can provide a specific remediation timeline. Based on what I've heard, I would estimate 2 to 3 weeks to stabilize the core functionality, assuming I have proper access and cooperation. The board members looked at each other. One by one, they nodded. Very well, said Walter. Patricia will process your contract immediately. You'll begin tomorrow. Richard stood abruptly. I need to be clear that I object to both these terms and this approach. Nathan has been making progress on the issues, and bringing in an external consultant undermines his authority. The chairman's response was measured but firm. Your objection is noted, Richard. However, the board has made its decision. Candace will have full authority over the reconciliation engine effective tomorrow. As the meeting adjourned, I caught Richard's glare from across the room. His expression promised that while he might have lost this battle, the war wasn't over. I maintained a professional demeanor, thanking the board members and confirming details with Patricia. As I walked out of the building, contract signed and initial payment processing, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. There was satisfaction, certainly, at the validation of my worth and the reversal of fortune. But there was also apprehension about the challenges ahead. I wasn't returning to fix a simple bug. I was walking into a system in crisis with a hostile CEO and his unqualified son potentially working against me. Still, as I drove home, one thought kept surfacing through all the others. I built this system once. I could rebuild it again. Walking back into Meridian's offices the next day felt surreal. The security guard at the front desk, the same one who had escorted me out 3 months earlier, did a double take when I presented my new contractor badge. Welcome back, Miss Ross, he said, a hint of a smile suggesting he approved of this turn of events. I was assigned a conference room as my temporary office rather than my old space, which I learned had been given to Nathan. It was actually a better arrangement, providing neutral territory and more room to work with the team I'd need to assemble. My first action was to request access to all system logs, code repositories, and incident reports from the past 3 months. My second was to send an email to all remaining members of the technical team, introducing myself as a consultant engaged to address the reconciliation engine issues and requesting a meeting in 2 hours. When I opened the code repository, I nearly gasped aloud. The elegant architecture we had refined over years had been brutally modified. Critical validation routines had been commented out with notes like performance optimization, transaction idempotency checks, essential for preventing duplicate processing, had been simplified to the point of uselessness. No wonder banks were reporting reconciliation failures. The system logs told an even more alarming story. Failed transactions, timeout errors, and data inconsistencies had become routine. The overnight batch processing that should take 3 hours was regularly running for 8 or more, pushing dangerously close to market opening times. At 11, technical team members began filing into the conference room. I recognized a few faces, but most were new hired after the exodus of experienced developers. They looked tired and defeated, the telltale signs of technical professionals fighting a losing battle against broken systems. Thank you all for coming, I began. I'm Candace Ross. Many of you may know me as the original architect of the reconciliation engine. I've been engaged by the board to help resolve the current system issues. A young developer in the back raised his hand. Are you really getting $11,000 a day? He asked bluntly. I smiled slightly. My contract terms aren't relevant to our technical discussion. What is relevant is that I have complete authority to make whatever changes are necessary to stabilize the system, and I'll need all of your help to do it. I spent the next hour outlining what I had observed in the code and logs, and my preliminary plan for rolling back the most problematic changes while implementing emergency patches for critical functionality. I assigned specific responsibilities to team members based on their apparent strengths, careful to be inclusive and respectful of their existing knowledge. Just as we were wrapping up, the door opened and Nathan walked in. The room fell silent. I heard we had a meeting about my system, he said, emphasizing the possessive. I should have been invited. I maintained a professional tone. Nathan, I'm conducting a technical assessment of the reconciliation engine. The board has given me authority to implement necessary changes. I'd be happy to brief you separately on my findings if you'd like. That won't be necessary, came Richard's voice from the doorway. Nathan will be joining your team as my representative. All proposed changes should be reviewed by him before implementation. I turned to face Richard directly. My contract specifies complete technical authority over these systems. Team composition and approval processes fall under that authority. I'm still the CEO of this company, Richard replied coldly. And I respect that, I said. However, the board has approved my contract terms specifically because of the urgent nature of these issues. If you'd like to revisit those terms, I suggest you take it up with the board, not with me. We stared at each other for a tense moment. The developers watched nervously, caught in the power struggle. Finally, Richard said, Nathan will observe your work as a learning opportunity. That should not interfere with your authority. It wasn't ideal, but it was a compromise I could work with. Fine. Nathan can observe, but all decisions about the reconciliation engine will be made by me until the system is stabilized. Is that clear? Nathan started to protest, but Richard cut him off with a sharp look. Agreed. Keep me updated on your progress. After they left, I turned back to the team. Let's get to work. We have a system to save. The next 3 weeks were among the most intense of my career. I worked 14-hour days leading the team in a carefully orchestrated rehabilitation of the reconciliation engine. We rolled back the most disastrous changes, reinstated critical validation routines, and implemented new monitoring systems to catch issues before they affected customers. Nathan attended meetings sporadically, sometimes attempting to defend his changes, but increasingly falling silent as the evidence of their failure mounted. Richard remained a distant but palpable presence, receiving daily updates, but no longer attempting to interfere directly. By the end of the second week, we had reduced reconciliation failures by 70%. By the end of the third, overnight processing times had returned to normal, and no new balance discrepancies had been reported for 5 consecutive days. The board requested a formal presentation on the 4th Friday of my engagement. I prepared comprehensive documentation of the issues we had found, the changes we had made, and recommendations for preventing similar problems in the future. In the boardroom with Richard and Nathan present, I delivered my assessment honestly, but without unnecessary criticism. The reconciliation engine is now stable and functioning at expected performance levels. We've implemented additional safeguards to prevent similar issues in the future. I've also documented a proper training program for onboarding new developers to these systems, which should take approximately 12 months for someone with the appropriate background. Alicia asked, "What do you recommend for ongoing maintenance and development of these systems?" I had anticipated this question. The current technical team has made excellent progress in understanding the systems under crisis conditions. With continued mentorship, they could become fully proficient within 6 to 9 months. I would recommend engaging an experienced lead developer with a strong background in financial systems to guide that process. Walter, the chairman, looked at me directly. Would you be interested in that role, Candace? The board has been very impressed with your work. Before I could respond, Richard interjected. If I may, the board should know that I've been in discussions with several qualified candidates for a permanent CTO position who could oversee these systems. Nathan has also expressed interest in moving to a more appropriate role in product strategy, where his business background would be better utilized. It was as close to a concession as Richard Bennett would ever make. His son had failed spectacularly, nearly destroying the company in the process, but Richard had found a way to reposition this as a natural career evolution. I felt no desire to gloat. I appreciate the offer, Walter, but I've found I enjoy the independence of consulting. I would be happy to continue supporting Meridian on a project basis, but I'm building my own company now. The meeting concluded with unanimous board approval to extend my consulting engagement for another 30 days, at the same rate transitioning to a more limited advisory role afterward. As we filed out of the boardroom, Richard stopped me in the hallway. "You won," he said quietly. "I hope it feels good." I looked at him steadily. This wasn't about winning or losing, Richard. It was about doing the right thing for the systems, the company, and the clients who depend on us. I hope Nathan finds a role better suited to his actual interests and abilities. That would be a win for everyone. He seemed surprised by my response, perhaps expecting gloating or hostility. After a moment, he nodded curtly and walked away. As I returned to my temporary office, I felt a weight lifting. 3 months ago, I had been escorted from this building, my career apparently in ruins. Now I had returned on my own terms, proved my value beyond question, and charted a new path forward that I found more fulfilling than the one I had lost. The firing that had seemed like an ending had actually been the beginning of something better. Over the following months, my consulting business flourished beyond anything I had imagined. Word spread quickly in the financial technology industry about the consultant who had saved Meridian Technologies from a self-inflicted disaster. My phone rang constantly with companies facing challenging technical problems or seeking guidance on system architecture. I carefully selected my clients, focusing on projects that were technically interesting and where I could make a genuine difference. I hired an assistant, then a business manager, and eventually brought on 2 junior consultants to help with the workload. What had begun as a necessity after my firing had evolved into a thriving business that gave me more freedom, more variety, and yes, substantially more income than my corporate career ever had. Meridian remained a client, though, on a more limited basis. Nathan had indeed been reassigned to the product strategy team, where his business background was actually relevant. Richard maintained a professional distance in our occasional interactions. The tension between us transformed into something resembling mutual respect. The most unexpected development came 6 months after my return. Alicia, the board member who had first reached out to me, invited me to lunch. "I'm leaving Meridian's board to start a venture capital firm focused on financial technology," she told me. "I'd like you to join as a technical advisor, helping evaluate potential investments." It was an intriguing opportunity that would allow me to see the industry from yet another angle. I accepted, beginning a partnership with Alicia that continues to this day. Even more satisfying was being able to create opportunities for my former team members. Jacob, who had left Meridian shortly after my firing, became my first hired consultant. Teresa joined later. I even brought Miranda in as a senior advisor after her retirement from Meridian. "You've built something remarkable," Miranda told me, during a celebration dinner marking my consulting firm's first anniversary. "And to think none of it would have happened if Richard hadn't tried to replace you with his son." She was right, of course. The injustice that had seemed so devastating had ultimately forced me to stretch beyond my comfort zone and discover capabilities I hadn't known I possessed. The experience taught me lessons I carry with me every day. First, technical excellence alone isn't enough. For 16 years, I had focused almost exclusively on being the best systems architect I could be, naively believing that merit would always be recognized and rewarded. I now understand that organizational awareness, business acumen, and strategic thinking are equally important skills to develop. Second, Sometimes the worst professional experiences lead to the best opportunities. Being fired after 16 years was traumatic, but it broke me out of a comfortable rut and pushed me to reimagine my career on my own terms. Third, know your worth, and don't be afraid to assert it. When Meridian needed me back, I didn't discount my value out of gratitude for the opportunity. I recognized the unique expertise I brought and priced it accordingly. Fourth, integrity matters more than job security. Standing up to Richard and refusing to pretend his son was qualified cost me my position, but I could still look at myself in the mirror. Had I compromised my professional standards, I might have kept my job, but at the cost of my self-respect and potentially others' financial security. Most importantly, I learned that resilience isn't about never failing. It's about how you respond when you do. Being escorted from the building by security was one of the lowest moments of my life, but instead of letting it define me as a victim, I used it as fuel to build something better. Today, my consulting firm employs 15 people and serves clients across the financial industry. I work fewer hours than I did at Meridian, but make several times the income. I choose projects that interest me and clients whose values align with mine. I've spoken at conferences not just about technical topics, but about professional resilience and career reinvention. As for Meridian, they eventually replaced Richard as CEO after 2 more quarters of disappointing results. The new leadership has rebuilt much of what was damaged during his tenure, though they never quite regained their former market position. Nathan, I heard, finally found his place in marketing, where his people skills and business background serve him well. I bear him no ill will. He was in many ways a victim of his father's ambition as much as I was. Sometimes I think about that day in Richard's office when he fired me. At the time, it felt like the end of everything I had worked for. In reality, it was the beginning of something far better than I could have imagined. So if you're facing your own professional crisis, remember my story. Stand by your principles, know your worth, and recognize that sometimes what looks like a devastating setback is actually the universe pushing you toward the path you were meant to take all along. Have you ever been underestimated at work or pushed out of a position unfairly? How did you respond, and what did you learn from the experience? Drop a comment below and share your story. We can all learn from each other's journeys. And if you found value in my story, please hit that like button, subscribe to see more real-life experiences, and share with someone who might need to hear this message of resilience and reinvention. Thank you for listening, and remember, your greatest comeback might be waiting just on the other side of your biggest setback.